Now, when the news first broke that the presidency had placed a temporary ban on foreign trips by ministers and heads of government agencies, it was greeted with a lot of public excitement. It is unclear at the moment exactly the reason for this ban, because the original statement from the Chief of Staff cited disruption of government's domestic work as reason for the ban. But there seems to be the need for some more clarity. As Deputy Chief of Staff Abu Jinapor says, that sentence in the statement does not necessarily mean that government appointees or have been abusing the foreign travel privileges, as many have understood his boss's statement to mean. We'll hear from the Deputy Chief of Staff's reasoning. But let's remind you the exact words used by his boss, the Chief of Staff, Fema Osei Opare. And you may have seen this already, but let me quickly go through it once again with you. It says the temporary ban on foreign travel by all ministers, deputy ministers, MMDCEs and head of government agencies. Now, the President of the Republic has directed that all foreign travels by honorable ministers, deputy ministers, MMDCEs and heads of government agencies should be temporarily suspended with immediate effect. Guidelines in respect of future foreign travels. And be careful with this point where we've highlighted. It is aimed, they say, at minimizing disruption to government domestic work, and that those guidelines will be communicated to them shortly. The Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, by the way, is exempted from this temporary ban on foreign travels for obvious reasons, of course. And she's asking them to please acknowledge receipt and acceptance for strict compliance. Now, you need to take note of that highlighted part that says the guidelines that is about to be introduced, is aimed at minimizing disruption to government domestic work. So with that, there seemed to be a clear indication that government domestic work has been or is being disrupted by these foreign travels, which are not cheap on the taxpayer, by the way. But Deputy Chief of Staff Abu Jinapor disagrees with those who think that way. Listen to him.
The president thinks that it's about time we standardize the modalities or framework within which government officials travel out of our country. And therefore, he's put a temporary ban on foreign travels by ministers, deputy ministers, MMDCs, and head of government agencies, with a view of giving us the space to formulate this modality to regulate foreign travels by government officials. Well, his hope is that when that is done, it will, one, certainly save cost if we were to minimize foreign travels by government officials, given the framework within which these travels will be embarked upon. Two, it will also result in having government officials in the jurisdiction to embark on the all-important domestic work of government business. So generally is taking the issue of foreign travels and approvals or otherwise another step further, one step further in terms of how we will put in place a standardized framework to regulate foreign travels by government officials.
So the two problems we are seeking to solve are, one, cost, and two, the furtherance of the domestic agenda of government.
Those are the benefits that we hope to achieve for the Ghanaian people with this sort of arrangement.
And this is not something that can be done without banning them temporarily. I mean, can they not go about their business while you make these assessments? Well,
so the whole idea is that when you put a ban, and once the ban will be lifted with the birth of these modalities. Right? So when the ban is lifted, we all will be fully appraised of the framework within which travels can be embarked upon. I'll give you an example. For the past year and a half, for instance, the president has insisted that all ministers attend cabinet meetings. And as you may be aware, President Akufo-Addo has been exceptional when it comes to cabinet meetings. He's held cabinet meetings every fortnight since he came into office, and he takes cabinet very seriously, and therefore insists that all ministers should attend cabinet. So as a matter of general rule, the Chief of Staff will normally disallow any request for travel if that request or that travel will coincide with a cabinet date. For instance, conferences, government of Ghana and the people of Ghana are represented at numerous conferences across the world. The question as to number one, what conference should we participate in? Two, if we were to participate in a conference, what sort of representation should we have at a conference? Should it be a ministerial representation or a deputy ministerial representation or a director from the ministry or a head of an agency? All of these questions which do not have a definitive answer to, these modalities will seek to answer all these questions. So it will achieve also two matters of certainty. One, the members of government will be fully aware of the sort of travels which will be encouraged. And the Chief of Staff will also have a framework within which he will exercise a discretion, either to approve or disapprove a request for a travel.
I guess what I was trying to understand was why this needs to be done in the atmosphere of a ban. Why not do all this anyway? Why is there a need to ban travel while you do this?
Well, in these matters, you get a better space to put in place the right arrangement when you have put a hold. In the midst of it, you may not be able to have a proper appreciation of the sort of guidelines you should put in place. And like I said earlier, we have been in office for a year and a half already. We've had the experience, we've had the benefit of the scope of travels and the nature of the travels and so on and so forth. It shouldn't be such a big problem. But the president thinks that even before these modalities come up, we should put this ban. In exceptional circumstances, I'm sure within the period of the ban, some exceptions may be granted, but the ban is in place. The modalities will come out. It will not take us forever. It should be very soon. And when that is done, all of us, members of his government, and the person who is charged with the responsibility of approving or otherwise of applications for travels and the rest, will all have some certainty as to how foreign travels are to be embarked upon in our country.
Does the president or perhaps the chief of staff believe that the rate of travel of some of these appointees is affecting the execution of the president's domestic agenda?
The president's domestic agenda, I believe, is on course, and objective, fair-minded Ghanaians will attest to that on all fronts, whether it's in the area of education or health or economy or infrastructure development or what have you. The agenda is fully on course. But like I said, this problem has been a problem for many years. It's been a problem since 1993. And whenever you have a system or a situation which is not regulated, which has no rules and regulations, such a system is subject to abuse. I mean, there's no two ways about that.
So whether it's been some abuse,
whether it's been in the case of small-scale mining or whatever industry we have in our country, if you don't have a set of rules and regulations which gives certainty and predictability, you are bound to have abuse. It's standard. So I wouldn't be surprised if there has been some abuses, but the real objective for putting in place this ban and also coming out with these modalities has nothing to do with the fact that the president's domestic agenda has been compromised over the year. I think the president's domestic agenda has been vigorously on course. There's absolutely no two ways about that.
But the travel has affected it?
No, not that I'm aware. I know that the agenda or the work of government is being vigorously pursued. What it is that we want to make sure that we take this enterprise or system of governmental travels to another level, take it a step further, and ensure that we deal with the long age problem of foreign travels by government officials, where we don't know which travels should elicit the representation or the attention of a minister or a deputy minister or a director. We are all in the dark, or whether or not we should have a representation at all, whether or not a particular travel is useful and beneficial to the country. All of that has been at large. The president wants to bring certainty to this sort of environment. So we all know that a particular travel of this nature is one that will be approved or disapproved. I think that is a step in the right direction.
Give us some quick education. What would be the regular process if a minister wants to travel under the existing arrangements? What would he do? Who would approve it? Where would he get the funding from? Can you walk us through what a typical situation would be like?
With the existing system, the minister will have to write to the chief of staff and seek for her consent for the travel. The minister will indicate the purpose of the travel, what he seeks to do for the country, the duration of the travel, and all of that. The chief of staff will look at it, evaluate it. I've already given you one basis upon which the chief of staff will normally disallow a request of that nature, that if the travel will coincide with a cabinet meeting, the chief of staff will normally disallow it, except in exceptional circumstances. A deputy minister will do so. Head of government agencies don't, and this ban is to cover all of them. MMDCs don't apply to the chief of staff for approval. This ban is to cover all of them. Now, when the approval is given, depending on the nature of the travel, if it's a travel within the context of the ministry will fund it. If it's an agency, the agency will fund it. But every travel, even before this ban, by a minister or a deputy minister, ought to be approved by the chief of staff. It is this approval that the president wants to apply some regulation to.
And he also wants to bring in the MMDCs and heads of to the approval process.
Exactly.
So from now on, that is the intention. Once these guidelines come out, they will all have to seek approval from the chief of staff before they can travel.
Well, for instance, the guidelines will speak to it. I can't, on top of my head, be certain as to the nature of the guidelines or the terms the guidelines will be formulated around. Because, for instance, we have about more than 250 MMDCs. So it may be impracticable to suggest that every MMDC should take approval from the chief of staff personally. So the chief of staff may delegate to, say, the minister of local government, or delegate to one of her deputies, or delegate to an official of the presidency. But there will certainly be some approval mechanism which will be regulated. Heads of agencies also are many, and there may be that there will be bureaucratic bottlenecks if the chief of staff were to approve the travels of all heads of government agencies herself. However, she will put in place a mechanism for such approvals.
Abu Jinapor is Deputy Chief of Staff. Now, political science lecturer Ransford Jampo has also been sharing his thoughts on this matter, and he actually has some suggestions going forward. We'll read that to you shortly, but let's get on the line and speak with Head of Public Sector Reforms, Dr. Kusi Buafo. Doc, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. How much do you know about this ban?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your time here on the show. I was asking for you to tell us how much you know about this ban.
Well, as far as I am concerned, I got to know it early this morning officially, even though from the point of view of where I am, it is necessary that at this point in time that we need to coordinate very well in order to see the way forward, especially when we are cruising towards the exiting of the island, because a whole lot of work needs to be done in the coming 6 months.
Okay. Well, since you know a bit about this, and I asked that because I wanted to know how much information is at your disposal. Perhaps you could clear it up for us a bit. Because first of all, in the statement, we see the Chief of Staff writes the statement to say that the new guidelines that are to be introduced will be minimizing, or will seek to, or aim, that's the word she uses, to minimize the disruption caused to domestic work. But then the Deputy Chief of Staff in his interview continuously says no. This is not because there has been any disruption in government domestic affairs. Do you? I mean, where do you stand? Can you help us get that clarification that we want?
Well, I repeat the statement again, as if.
So the statement says the guidelines that are about to be introduced are supposed to minimize disruption to government's domestic work, which obviously means that the frequent travels of some of these appointees is something that's disrupting government domestic work. Isn't that correct?
Well, looking at government work, when you look at government work, it may be possible, of course it is, that in certain key areas where government needs real-time information, it may happen that because of the absence of one or two ministers, the work will have to come to a halt awaiting the ministers, their returns.
How bad is this situation? How bad would you say that situation is? You've been in charge of public sector reforms. How bad is this situation? The situation where ministers are unavailable and so work can't progress?
Well, if you look at it, where we are now, it has become very critical that we seriously address this particular issue. Not that the problem is so overwhelming that it has seriously disrupted the entire work, domestically. What we are saying is that going forward, from the point of view as to where we are, looking at the impact we have made as far as the physical consolidation is concerned, looking also at the recovery we have made so far, and looking at the flagship programs that are about to be launched on a very large scale in 2019, and our planned exit of the IMF conditionalities, it has become very, very necessary that all hands to be on deck at every available time, so that when decisions are being made, we will not lack in it, because time is not on our side, just like the president has already said. If you plan to exit IMF conditionalities in 2019, somewhere in April, what you need to know is that the consolidation and the coordination of the various functions and activities should start from now, because 2019, 2020 is just at the corner. And you'll be going to Ghanaians once again to ask for maybe another opportunity. So at this point in time, this is the time every appointee must become seriously aware that going forward, everybody
all hands on deck,
be on board, especially at DCE and MMCEs at the district where the impact of the Galamsey activities has been so grievous, and the government is considering lifting the ban. They must be available.
So is that why we're seeing the presidency is imposing this ban now?
Well,
all hands on deck, right?
Yeah, I believe that everybody should be on board. We are getting to a time that I think the issue of this decision will have to be taken, and Mr. A or Minister A is not available, DCEB is not there, DCE has traveled and the activities of Galaxy is going on. I'm not aware at this particular area. And for that matter, when things go on, you wouldn't even know when to take immediate action. So I think this is the time to tell everybody that, hey, Jack, come home. This is the time to stay. Let us refocus, putting our effort together. This is not the time for people to be moving in, going into areas that we think or in their absence, we may not be able to take certain critical decisions. So everybody should be available. Everybody should be here. We are now cruising to 2019. and that we need to consolidate all our activities here and there. Effort must be put together.
Right.
This is the time that I believe sincerely that all our flagship programs, the full benefits, we need report, and we need the report almost immediately. This is what the time
and that's why you're calling for all hands on deck. But one of the things that got people excited when we heard about this ban was that a lot of people thought that, whoa, finally, we're cutting down on the cost. We're cutting down on the cost of these, because, of course, these travels are expensive. And so people were excited that we're cutting down on this, the use of this money. Perhaps we could use it to buy ambulances because people are dying. Perhaps we could use it to buy beds. Are we just tickling ourselves and laughing?
Well, it may be due to that, but some of the travels are also very, very necessary. This is the government that has the private sector as a focus. When you have private sector and an investor-focused government like this, please, sometimes some of these travels are so necessary, especially negotiating on behalf of prospective investors. When you have a business development minister traveling with probably entrepreneurs or potential investors in Ghana or potential investors abroad, meeting them and discussing issues concerning Ghana, I don't see there is anything wrong with that. When you have the finance minister also moving here and there to find out that loans are negotiated and negotiated very effectively, when you have public sector reforms, the senior minister traveling, looking at various areas, the impact of reforms that are going on elsewhere that could be replicated here without reinventing the wheel. When you have such travels, I don't think they are a waste of money, and I don't think they are.
But you know that some are certainly a waste of the taxpayers' money, for sure.
Well, yeah,
and that's why the government is seeking to cut it down.
As unnecessary.
But that's obviously the reason why government or the presidency is stepping in now with this intervention, isn't it?
Yeah, that may be a subsidiary benefit of the ban. That may be a subsidiary benefit. But largely, travels are necessary. The president is doing a lot of traveling, and it is giving us huge benefit. You see, we are developing countries, and we need to showcase ourselves. Sometimes, the issue is that when you sit down, for instance, people believe MPs should also be facilitators of development.
Okay, well, Dr. Bafo,
facilitate the development.
Right, Dr. Bafo, thank you so much for your time. That's what time will allow us. That's all time will allow us this time around. Thank you so much. I will get back to you in the future, I believe. Dr. Akufo-Addo is the head of public sector reforms. Well, like I indicated to you, Professor Jinapor has been speaking. He also has some suggestions on the way forward, and some of the suggestions, let me just go through them quickly. He says that going forward, only conferences that bring assistance in cash or kind must be encouraged, and these should be attended necessarily, or shouldn't be attended necessarily by top officials. They should be attended by technocrats who have what it takes to fully grasp what the discussion is all about and who can implement those decisions. He says that all foreign trips for medical checkups must be banned to force us to prioritize in improving healthcare here at home. He says, let appointees die here as a result of poor healthcare facilities to compel us to sit up if that's what is necessary to be done. He also says that ministers and top appointees who are caught traveling abroad to attend lectures must be sacked. Only ministers who have the requisite qualification, he says, should be appointed. And he's also asking for vacation travels and leave outside to be managed well so that work is not jeopardized.